Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to go my review of WCW's Halloween Havoc 2000. Starting off the evening, we'll go to our first match of the night. It is for the WCW Tag Team Championships. It is the Natural Born Thrillers versus Mysterio and Kidman versus Disco Inferno and Alex Wright. I thought it was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup with all teams involved, but Sean O'Haire hits a swanton off the top rope, pins for the 3. And your winners of the match are the Natural Born Thrillers. Hats off to the Natural Born Thrillers for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the WCW Hardcore Championship. It is Reno versus Sergeant AWOL. I thought it was an okay match. Back and forth matchup between Reno and AWOL, with Reno keeping the pace of the match. AWOL ends up putting Reno through a table, but Reno ends up hitting the finish. Pins for the 3. And your winner of the match is Reno. Hats off to Reno for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the Misfits in Action versus the Perfect Event. I thought it was an okay match. Back and forth matchup between both teams, with the Misfits in Action keeping the pace of the match. And the Misfits of Action hit the finish, pins for the 3. And your winners of the match are the Misfits in Action. Hats off to the Misfits in Action for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Shane Douglas teaming up with Torrie Wilson versus Conan and Tigress. I thought it was an okay match. Back and forth matchup between both teams, with Shane Douglas keeping the pace of the match. Conan ultimately hits the finish on Shane Douglas, pins for the 3. And your winners of the match are Conan and Tigress. Hats off to Conan and Tigress for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is David Flair versus Buff Bagwell. I thought it was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between David Flair and Bagwell. Luger is here. Luger ends up attacking Bagwell. And your winner of the match due to disqualification is Buff Bagwell. Hats off to Buff Bagwell for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is a kickboxing match. It is Ernest Miller versus Mike Sanders. I thought this was an awful match. Back and forth matchup between Ernest Miller and Sanders, with Miller keeping the pace of the match. But Mike Sanders ultimately gets the win in this match due to countout. Hats off to Mike Sanders for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Mike Awesome versus Vampiro. I thought this was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Awesome and Vampiro, with Awesome keeping the pace of the match. Then Awesome ultimately hits a devastating Awesome bomb off the top rope on Vampiro, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is Mike Awesome. Hats off to Mike Awesome for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the WCW United States Championship. It is Lance Storm versus Hugh Morris versus Hacksaw Jim Duggan. I thought it was an okay match. Back and forth matchup between Storm, Morris, and Duggan, with Morris keeping the pace of the match. Morris ends up hitting a moonsault off the top rope, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is Hugh Morris. Hats off to Hugh Morris for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Jeff Jarrett versus Sting. I thought it was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Jarrett and Sting, with Jarrett keeping the pace of the match. Fake Sting is here. Fake Sting ends up attacking Sting. Jarrett then hits Sting with a guitar, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is Jeff Jarrett. Hats off to Jeff Jarrett for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. It is Booker T versus Scott Steiner. I thought it was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Booker T and Scott Steiner, with Booker T keeping the pace of the match. And your winner of this the winner of this match by disqualification is Booker T. Hats off to Booker T for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Chronic versus Goldberg, kind of a handicap match, if you will. It was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Chronic and Goldberg, with Goldberg keeping the pace of the match. Goldberg hits a spear, and then Goldberg ultimately hits a devastating jackhammer on Chronic, pins for the 3. And your winner of the match is Goldberg. Hats off to Goldberg for getting the win in this matchup. A couple things I want to say about Halloween Havoc 2000 before I get out of here, man. Number one, I was a humongous fan of the Halloween Havoc pay-per-views. I always thought it brought in really unique matches to the product. Even from way back in the day, man, you had like I remember the match that happened with Abdullah, the Butcher. And it was in like the Cage of Doom, if you will. It was a great match. It was a fantastic match. I mean, some of the notable names in that match were the Steiners, Abdullah, Cactus Jack, Diamond Stud, a.k.a. Razor Ramon, a.k.a. Scott Hall, rest in peace. Giant Gonzalez was also in that match, or El Gigante. It was just a fantastic match, man. And Halloween Havoc, I mean, they just put on so many good matches back in the day. Matches with Sting and, the Coal Miner's Glove. Just to name a couple of matches. It was always unique with what they did with Halloween Havoc. But with that being said, the Halloween Havoc in 2000 just was not it. And I mentioned this numerous amount of times now about these pay-per-views from late 1999 to 2001. It was a decline of pay-per-views. The attendance was not there. The crowds really weren't there. The storylines were horrendous at this point, and whoever was booking WCW at this time, I mean, I feel like they didn't really care. I think there was, self-sabotage within the company to try to ruin WCW, to eventually for WCW to get bought out by WWE and Vince McMahon. So, just the pay-per-views just from, like I said, late 1999 all the way up to 2001 were just on a steadily decline, man. It was a slow sinking ship for WCW up to this point. So, with that being said, though, just like I do with every single one of these pay-per-views, I always give these pay-per-views a rating from 1 out of a 10. 1 being the absolute worst, 10 being the absolute best. I'm going to have to give Halloween Havoc 2000 a solid rating of a 3 at best. But this is my review of Halloween Havoc 2000. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.